Thomas Williams is a 72-year-old disabled cancer patient who suffers from glaucoma, a damaged back disc, and COPD. Due to these ailments, he has a medical marijuana card to manage his discomfort. In November of 2013, police unexpectedly raided his house, claiming that they had reason to believe he was dealing this marijuana illegally. On February 23, 2015, L.L. Brazier of the Detroit Free Press reported that police handcuffed him, ransacked his home, but did not charge him with a crime. However, they did take $11,000 in cash, his car, his TV, his cell phone, a shotgun, and even tried to take his house. As an elderly disabled man without a car or a phone, he remained in his house alone for 3 days until someone happened to stop by. He then had to fight for over a year to get his possessions back. If you think this sounds a lot like a crime, many people would agree with you. However, it's actually federally legal as something called civil asset forfeiture under the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act. Many states are starting to realize that these laws need to be changed. On September 29th, California's governor signed Law SB 443 to start this process. But there's a lot more work to be done. Today, I'm going to explain to you what civil forfeiture is, why it's being abused today, and how I propose we change and reform the issue. A law review written by Michael Vanderbilt of the University of Pennsylvania in February 2015 defines civil forfeiture as a case taken against a piece of property rather than against a person. Essentially, if a crime is committed, the act of civil forfeiture can help eliminate the profit incentives for the criminals. The police are allowed to take away anything that could have possibly been purchased with illegal profits, or they can seize assets that were used to commit a crime, such as a car, a plane, or a house, and they can do so without a warrant. Little proof is needed for the police in these seizures, giving officers the ability to use their judgment to determine the guilt. And since they're civil rather than criminal forfeitures, they do not need to charge the individual with a crime. Then the owner of the asset must take it upon themselves to prove that their assets are innocent, and they must absorb all the legal fees in this process. The police are not required to document these forfeitures and can keep up to 80% of the value of the seized assets through a process called equitable sharing. Unfortunately, civil asset forfeiture laws have come to be very abused. The intent was to remove the profit incentives from the criminals, but instead it has presented a profit incentive to officers. The Institute for Justice is very passionate about this issue and produced a video called Policing for Profit. This video states that in the past 14 years, the federal government has raised over $29 billion from asset forfeiture. And these seizures have become a way for police to raise funds for their local precincts. However, they're not for the things that you would expect. On October 4th, 2016, Will Rackey of the Chicago Business Journal reported that since 2009, only 10% of forfeiture profits actually went to the Illinois State Police, while 50% were, quote, kept for themselves. In 2008, the Houston Chronicle reported that in Montgomery, Texas, forfeiture profits were used to purchase alcohol and a margarita machine for an employee barbecue. In order to maximize forfeiture profits, the police have come up with new ways to seize assets from citizens. Vanderbilt describes a process called reverse sting, where police are targeting the buyers of drugs rather than the sellers. Because if they seize money, they can keep the money, but if they seize drugs, they must destroy them. On July 16, 2015, John Kramer from the Institute for Justice wrote about Ken Corin, a small business owner who worked honestly his whole life at the convenience store he owned in North Carolina. As a small business owner, he frequently deposited sums of money less than $10,000 into his bank account. This was flagged as suspicious by the government because those profits could have been deposited as profits from drug deals. In February 2016, Ken finally got his money back after lots of time petitioning the government. And there are countless other stories like this published by the Institute for Justice. Many of them are individuals who have cash seized from their vehicles during traffic stops because their money could have been used to purchase drugs at a later date. On September 6, 2014, Florida Police Chief Mark Overton was quoted in a Washington Post article saying, "Those laws are meant to take a guy out for selling $1 million of cocaine or for laundering large amounts of money. They were never meant for a street cop to take a few $1,000s by the side of a road." The main problems with civil asset forfeiture are that the property owner is required to prove their asset to be innocent and that there are profit motives for the police. While victims are largely inconvenienced, the police can easily profit from these forfeitures through a process called equitable sharing. The Institute for Justice reported that equitable sharing profits have tripled in the last 14 years. Vanderbilt explains this process as when state and federal governments cooperate to share the profits from the seizure. This allows state officials to circumvent the stricter state requirements by substituting more lenient federal standards. With equitable sharing, local officers can then retain up to 80% of the drug profits or the seizure profits, and since there is no requirement for them to report these, they can spend them however they want. There is some change happening around these laws. According to Nikki Wolf from The Guardian, New Mexico made civil forfeiture illegal in 2015. However, in April of 2016, a woman was required to turn her car over to the city government because her son was arrested for drunk driving at his wheel and her car was seized due to this incident. The court required her to transfer the ownership regardless of the fact that the process was illegal in the state. So while taking steps to reform these laws are great, doing it at the state level is not going to cut it. As I said earlier, California recently passed a law to reform civil forfeiture. The bill would require criminal charges to be brought in order to seize assets, would prohibit equitable sharing, and would require the plaintiff to prove guilt rather than the property owner to prove innocence. On October 1st, 2016, Andrew Uprocks of Roberts News said that the California bill attempts to set a precedent for federal law to follow. He also reported that since 2015, 17 states have attempted to reform civil forfeiture. However, this is still less than half of our states, and federal law is still superior to state law. So what really needs to be changed is the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act, or CAFRA, at the national level. In order to effectively reform civil asset forfeiture, I propose making 4 changes to CAFRA. First, I propose replacing equitable sharing with a system for allocating funds from forfeitures to police departments to budget for necessary supplies. According to the Chicago Business Review, the Illinois Police Department raised $72 million in seizures and assets over the last 7 years. If these funds were allocated efficiently, the police efforts could be benefited by over $10 million a year. Secondly, I propose changing the burden of proof of evidence from the property owner to the plaintiff. Third, I propose requiring that legal fees be returned to successful claimants. According to Vanderbilt, standard attorney fees are at least $10,000, which is typically greater than the asset in question, causing 80% of these forfeitures to go uncontested due to these high fees. If citizens were able to reclaim this money upon being proven innocent, less violations of the law would occur because officers wouldn't get away with the unjust forfeitures as easily. And fourth, I propose requiring officers to become certified on civil asset forfeiture, including a process on reporting the assets, values, and reasons for forfeiture to ensure that the intent of the law is carried out correctly. With these changes to CAFRA, funds will be more effectively allocated, victims will have more rights, and the abuse of the law will be drastically reduced. These are very similar to the changes that were taken effect into California, but now it's time to take them into effect at the national level. While these changes do seem to help fix the issue surrounding civil forfeiture, some think they're unnecessary. At a hearing on September 15, 2016, NYPD officials argued that reporting assets and seizures would slow down the process and inhibit their ability to carry out the true intent of the law, which is to stop crime. However, on October 12th, John Crow of Watchdog interviewed New York representatives who know that the NYPD has very advanced technological capabilities and say that this process would not be an impossibility or an inconvenience to the officers. Vandenberg also states some proponents' opinions, saying that civil forfeiture allows for crime control, increased drug arrests, and funding for the police. But as we have seen, while these are the intent of the law, there are issues with its implementation that need to be fixed through reform. Civil asset forfeiture does have good intentions, but in the cases of people like Thomas Williams and Ken Corrin, there are many innocent victims who would beg to differ. Any one of you or me could also be an innocent victim of this law. This is one of the few issues that both political parties agree needs to be reformed. So I urge you to do your part as a United States citizen and write to your representatives saying that you want to see the Civil Asset Forfeiture Reform Act change for the better. Thank you.